Montana, 1888. The Harlan place had been empty for 6 years. Before that, it had been Bill Harlan's life. 240 acres of Montana Valley land that Harlan had worked for 20 years before the winter of 1886 finished him. The Big Die-Up, people called it afterward, with the specific understatement of those who had survived something that killed everything they owned. The temperature had dropped to 40 below and stayed there for weeks. And when it was over, the range looked like a battlefield. Cattle frozen where they stood. Ranchers walking off land they could no longer afford to keep. Harlan had walked off in February of 1887. The bank had held the land for a year before dropping the price, then dropped it again. 2 prospective buyers had ridden out, looked, and ridden back, without getting off their horses. Caleb Stone had gotten off his horse. He had stood in the middle of the main field on a Thursday afternoon in March and looked at what the Big Die-Up had left behind. The fence line down in 3 sections, the barn roof caved on the east side. The fields returned to the particular wildness of land that had stopped being asked to produce anything, and felt something he had not felt in 32 years of a life that had given him few reasons to feel certain. He felt certain. 11 years of wages, saved every dollar from every ranch through Wyoming and Idaho and the Montana Territory, sleeping in bunkhouses and spending nothing he didn't have to spend. $420, every cent of it. The bank had taken $420. He had $10 and 240 acres that nobody else had wanted. He went to the house, his house, which required imagination to say confidently, and sat on the porch step and looked at his land in the late afternoon light. The fence first. Nothing else mattered until the fence was right. He had tools, a horse, his hands, and the stubbornness of a man who has been working toward one thing for 11 years. He was still planning the order of it when he heard hoofbeats on the road. A young woman on a very fine horse was coming through his gate, looking at the property with the expression of someone arriving to deliver news they are not certain will be well received. He stood up. He put his hat on, and he waited. Her name was Lila Bennett. He did not know this yet, but he knew from the quality of the horse and the cut of her riding clothes and the way she sat in the saddle with the ease of someone who had been riding since before she could read, that she was not from the struggling end of Clearwater County. She pulled up at the edge of the yard and looked at him. She was 22 years old, with direct blue eyes that assessed a situation before committing to a response. And she was doing exactly that now. "Mr. Stone," she said. "Miss," he said. He had not told anyone his name, which meant she had come knowing it. Lila Bennett. "My father is Marcus Bennett, the Bennett Ranch to your north and east." She did not wait for acknowledgement. "My father doesn't like loose ends on his border, Mr. Stone. He sent me here with $700 to make sure you climb back on your horse and keep riding." Caleb did not stop working the fence post he was driving. He spat in the dust at the foot of her horse. "Tell your father to keep his $700, he said. "This land cost me 11 years of calluses. 3 days and a check, don't buy that." She held his gaze without flinching. "You've seen what the Big Die-Up left here," she said. Not cruelly, just accurately. The fence is down in 3 sections. The barn roof is open to the sky. The fields haven't produced in 6 years. "I know what I bought," he said. "Then you know what it will take," she said. He looked at her for a moment, at the fine horse, the Bennett name, the blue eyes that were doing the honest arithmetic of the situation and reporting what they found. "Yes," he said. "I know exactly what it will take." He drove the next post. "And it's not your father's 700. She looked at him. She looked at the property. She looked at him again with an expression he could not quite read. "I'll tell him," she said. She turned her horse. She rode back through his gate. Caleb watched her go and drove the next post and thought, "That is not the last time I'll see her." He was right. She came back 3 days later, not with another offer. She came alone, without the formal quality of the first visit, on the same fine horse, but with a slightly less composed posture of someone who has come for a different reason and is not sure how to announce it. She pulled up at the fence line and watched him work for a moment. "My father's offer stands," she said. I know, he said. He kept working. She was quiet for a moment. He set a post and checked the level. You're doing that wrong, she said. He stopped and looked at her. The angle, she said. Glidden wire pulls differently than smooth wire. Post needs to lean 2 degrees into the tension direction, or it'll walk over by spring. The big die-up froze the soil chemistry in this valley. Posts that worked before 1886 don't hold the same way now. He looked at the post. He looked at her. You know fencing, he said. I grew up on a ranch, she said. My father's. But still a ranch. She dismounted and tied her horse to a nearby tree and came through the gap in the fence and looked at the post he had set. May I? She said. He stepped back. She adjusted the angle 2 degrees exactly as he had said and tamped it down and tested it and handed him back the post driver. He drove it. The post seated correctly. Thank you, he said. He meant it without decoration. She looked at the fence line at the work ahead, the scale of it. How long will this take you? She said. Alone. 2 weeks, he said. Maybe 3. I'm prioritizing the south section first. Everything else waits. Everything else, she said. The barn roof is open too. I know, he said. I sleep under that roof. He said it without complaint, just as information. She looked at him. He was a man who was going to sleep under a caved barn roof for weeks rather than fix it before the fence was done, because the fence was what mattered first, and he knew it. She stood at the fence for a moment. My father doesn't know I'm here, she said. Caleb looked at her. Does that happen often? He said. No, she said. She picked up the post driver. Show me where you need the next one. She came back the next day and the day after that. Not every day. She had her own life, a father who would have opinions about where she was spending her afternoons. But she came often enough that Caleb began, without intending to notice when she wasn't there. She was a good fencer. This was not something he had expected, and was something he respected immediately. She did not treat the work as anything other than what it was. Hard, physical, requiring attention. No performance, no commentary on the fact that she was doing labor that her father's employees were paid to do. She worked alongside him, and they moved down the fence line at a pace that would have taken Caleb alone considerably longer. He was proud. This was his flaw, and he knew it. On the 4th day, she said, Let me drive the posts on this section. You're losing angle when you're tired. I'm fine, he said. You're driving them straight, she said. Straight isn't right for this soil. 2 degrees. She held out her hand for the driver. He did not give it to her immediately. She waited. He gave her the driver. She drove 4 posts at the correct angle without comment. He checked them. They were right. He did not say anything about it, but the following day he asked her to check his angle on each post before he drove it, which was the closest he could come to admitting she had been right. They talked while they worked. She knew this land better than he did, had ridden every acre of the valley since childhood, and she told him things no map would show. Which pastures flooded in spring where the soil was deep enough to grow grain. What the big die-up had done to the underground water table in the south section. He told her about the 11 years in pieces, the way you tell someone things when you are side by side doing physical work, and the conversation arrives naturally. One afternoon in April, sitting on the fence rail at the end of a long day, she said, Why this one? There were other properties that didn't need this much work. He looked at the land they had been building for 2 weeks, the fence straight and solid now, where before it had been down. Because nobody else wanted it, he said. She looked at him. That's the reason. It needed someone, he said. Land that nobody wants still needs someone to believe in it. She was quiet. She looked at the property, at what it had been when he arrived, and what it was becoming, section by section. My father's land has never needed anyone, she said. It's always been wanted. She said it the way you say something true you haven't said before and are hearing for the first time yourself. That's a different thing, she said, than being cared for. Caleb said nothing, but something that had been building since a blue-eyed woman had corrected his fence post angle on a Tuesday in March, moved one step closer to being said. Neither of them noticed the Bennett ranch hand on the ridge to the north, sitting very still on a gray horse. He had been there for 20 minutes. He was not paid to keep secrets. Marcus Bennett came on a Thursday morning. He was 60 years old, broad-shouldered, with the look of a man who had been the most powerful presence in every room he had entered for 30 years and had stopped noticing. He arrived on a horse that cost more than Caleb's entire property, and he dismounted and looked at the south fence straight and solid along its entire repaired length, with the expression of a man assessing something he had not expected. Then he looked at Caleb. "You've done work here," he said. "Yes, sir," Caleb said. "My daughter has been helping you," Marcus Bennett said. "She corrected my post angle on the second day," Caleb said. "She was right. I've been asking her to check each one since." Something moved through Marcus Bennett's expression, a flicker of something before it became something harder. "My daughter was educated in St. Louis," Marcus Bennett said. "She speaks French. She plays piano. She is going to marry a man who can give her a life appropriate to who she is." He looked at the house, the roof still open on the east side, the work of someone building something with great care and very little money. Not a man sleeping under a caved barn roof because he ran out of money before he ran out of list. Caleb looked at him directly. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "I haven't asked your daughter anything. I've been fixing a fence." "I know what I saw," Marcus Bennett said, "and I know what it leads to." He stepped closer. "I'm going to say this once. My daughter is not for you. Not because of your character. I have nothing against your character. Because of what you don't have. This place will take years to become anything. Lila deserves more than years." Caleb looked at this man, at the certainty of him, the absolute conviction of a father who has decided what his daughter needs without asking her. "With respect, Mr. Bennett," he said, "I think that's her decision." Marcus Bennett's eyes went hard in the specific way of a man who has not been spoken to that way in a very long time. "Not while she's my daughter," he said. He mounted his horse. He rode away without looking back. Caleb stood in his yard and watched him go, and thought about a woman who had said, "That's a different thing than being cared for." He went back to work. He had fence posts to drive. His pride told him he didn't need anyone's approval to drive them right. He drove them right anyway. Before we go on, I want to ask you something different today. Most of you listening right now are somewhere in the middle of something. Maybe you're driving. Maybe you're cooking or folding laundry or sitting on a porch, watching the evening come in. That's what Wild West Embers is for. If this story is keeping you company today, leave a like. It means more than you know. And tell me in the comments, what are you doing right now while you listen? I genuinely want to know. Now let's get back, because Caleb Stone is about to wake up to the smell of smoke, her father told her that evening. Not gently. Marcus Bennett was not a gentle man when he had decided something. He told her he had been to the Harlan property. He told her what he had said to Caleb. He told her with the complete certainty of a man who has never had to reconsider a decision, that the visits were finished. Lila sat across from him at the dinner table and heard all of it. She did not argue in the immediate moment. She had grown up with her father. She knew that confronting him directly was like driving a fence post straight into rock. You broke the post, not the rock. She had learned over 22 years that her father's positions could be moved, but only by evidence and patience, not by declaration. She went to her room. She sat at the window and looked at the Montana night, and thought about a man who was sleeping under a caved barn roof because the fence came first. About land that was being cared for rather than merely owned. About what her father had said. Not because of your character. I have nothing against your character. Which meant her father knew who Caleb was. He just hadn't decided whether who Caleb was could be enough. She got up from the window. She went to find her father. He was in his study with the accounts. She stood in the doorway. "Papa," she said. He looked up. "I'm not going to stop seeing him," she said. He set down his pen. "Lila." "I am 22 years old," she said. "I have done everything you have ever asked." St. Louis, French piano. She met his eyes directly. "I have never once asked you for anything you didn't want to give." He was very still. "I'm asking now," she said. Not for your approval, for your trust, that I know my own mind." He looked at her for a long moment, this daughter who had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness, and something else that was entirely her own. "He has nothing," Marcus Bennett said. "He has everything that matters," she said. She left before he could answer. He sat in his study for a long time. He had built 5,000 acres and a name in 3 counties. His daughter had just looked at him the way her mother used to when he was wrong about something. He picked up his pen. He put it down. He could not remember the last time he had been unable to work. June arrived, and Caleb kept working. The fence was done. He moved to the main field, the clearing first, then the turning of soil that had been compacted by 6 years of nothing being asked of it. He did this with a horse and a plow, and the specific patience of a man who understands that land needs to be convinced as much as worked. He planted oats in the north section. He had 4 cattle, the beginning of a herd, not a herd, in the south pasture where the fence was solid and the grass was growing back properly. Lila came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She had told her father she was going. He had not stopped her, which was not approval, but was a kind of exhausted acknowledgement that she was going anyway. She brought her knowledge of the valley and her competence, and she did not make it easier for him to be proud than to be right. When he drove a post wrong, she said so. When he planted the north section, she told him the drainage was too fast for standard oats, shorter season variety, or he'd lose it to frost. He listened. He replanted with the shorter variety. She noticed he had patched the barn roof, not properly, just enough to stop sleeping under the sky, and had used materials he had clearly salvaged from the collapsed east section rather than bought. "That patch won't last the winter," she said. "I know," he said. "It'll last until I can afford to do it right." She looked at the patched roof. She looked at him. She thought about a man who was doing things in the correct order rather than the comfortable order, who had accepted her correction about the fence posts after 1 day of pride and had asked her to check each one after that. And she understood that his pride was not the kind that refused to be wrong. It was the kind that needed a moment to accept being wrong and then moved forward. That was a different thing. She looked at the south pasture where 4 cattle were grazing on grass that had not been grazed in 6 years. 4 was not 60, but she could see in the way he had positioned them and managed the pasture rotation that he understood exactly how you got from 4 to 60 and intended to do it. "Caleb," she said. He looked up. "The oats in the north field," she said. "Replant the east third with a different variety, too." The big dye-up changed the drainage there permanently. He looked at the north field for a moment. "You're sure?" he said. "I've watched that field drain since I was 8 years old," she said. He looked at the field. He looked at her. "All right," he said. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. The next morning, he replanted the east third, and neither of them noticed that the ridge to the north was empty. The gray horse and the Bennett ranch hand gone, and that the foreman had been back at the Bennett house since the previous evening with a report from Marcus Bennett. Caleb was ready for Marcus Bennett's fury. He was not ready for what actually came. The fire started in Marcus Bennett's east barn on a Wednesday night in July. A lantern knocked over in the dark. Nobody knew for certain. It was past midnight when the alarm was raised, the east barn already well involved. The fire visible from Caleb's property as a glow on the northern horizon. Caleb smelled it before he saw it. He was out of his bunk and saddled in 4 minutes riding north before he had consciously decided to do anything, operating on the specific instinct of a man who has worked ranches his whole life and knows what fire really means. By the time he arrived, the Bennett operation was in organized chaos. A bucket line from the main well ranch hands working to keep the fire from the house and the equipment barn. The east barn was gone. That was accepted. But the breeding barn, the one that held Marcus Bennett's Morgan stallions and his best quarter-horse mares, animals representing 20 years of careful bloodline selection, was 20 feet from the east barn, and the wind was wrong. The breeding barn doors were latched. Inside, the horses were screaming. Caleb could see from where he pulled up that no one was going to the breeding barn. He rode to the foreman. "The horses," Caleb said. "Roof's going. the foreman said. He was a practical man, making a practical calculation. I'm not sending men in under that. Caleb looked at the breeding barn. He looked at the roof, the way the smoke was coming through the boards, the specific pattern that told him how much time was left. He got off his horse. He pulled his bandana, soaked it at the water trough, tied it across his face, and pulled the latch on the breeding barn door. The foreman grabbed his arm. You'll die in there. Caleb looked at him. How many horses? He said. 11, the foreman said. Caleb went in. The smoke inside was a living thing, not the clean smoke of an outdoor fire, but the dense, directional smoke of an enclosed space where the combustion had been building for an hour. Caleb moved by sound. The horses were in full panic, hooves against the stall walls, the specific terror of animals who understand the danger and cannot reach the door. He found the first stall by touch, got the halter on a Morgan stallion that was trying to kill everything in its reach, and talked to it the way you talk to an animal that is beyond reason, not with words, but with tone. The specific frequency that says, I am not the danger. The horse let him lead it to the door. He went back, stall by stall, trip by trip, losing count. On the fourth trip, a beam above him groaned with the sound of structural failure, deciding on a timeline. He got the horse out. He went back. He was on the 8th horse when his legs stopped working correctly, and he went down to one knee in the straw. And the horse he was leading pulled him back to his feet by sheer momentum, and he held the halter and let it pull him to the door. Outside, the air hit him, and he sat in the dirt, because sitting was what his body had decided. 3 horses were still inside. He got up. The foreman stepped in front of him. The roof is going. 3 more, Caleb said. You can't. Caleb walked around him. He went back in for 3 more. When he came out the last time, the roof came down 12 seconds after he cleared the door. A sound like the world ending. And Caleb sat in the dirt again, with his eyes watering so badly he couldn't see. And he heard Marcus Bennett's voice, not directed at him, just present. The voice of a man arriving at a scene and taking inventory. Caleb heard him count the horses. 11. Caleb heard him stop counting. Then he heard footsteps in the dirt and a hand on his arm. And Marcus Bennett pulled Caleb's stone to his feet and held his arm until he was steady, and neither of them said a word. The smoke had done something to Caleb's lungs. Not permanently. The ranch hand who had some medical knowledge said so with the cautious confidence of someone operating at the edge of his expertise. But for the next several weeks, heavy work was going to be a problem. Physical labor in the heat of a Montana summer with compromised lungs was not something a body recovered from quickly. Caleb understood what this meant. His oats were in the ground. His fence was standing. His 4 cattle were in the south pasture. But the work of late summer, the haying, the harvesting, the preparation for winter, was going to require what he did not currently have. He went home the morning after the fire. He sat on his porch and looked at his property and did the arithmetic. On the 2nd day after the fire, 2 of Marcus Bennett's ranch hands appeared at Caleb's gate. No message, no explanation. They tied their horses and went to the north field and began the haying with the efficient movements of men who have been told to do a job and are doing it. Caleb came out of the house. Mr. Bennett sent you, he said. The older one looked at him. He said the oats won't wait, and you can't cut them. Caleb looked at his field. He looked at the 2 men. He looked at his hands, which were bandaged where the burns from the barn had blistered. He almost said he didn't need the help. It was right there. 11 years of managing alone, of not asking for anything from anyone, of building something with his own hands and nobody else's. He felt it the way he always felt it. The specific resistance of a proud man against accepting what he needs. He thought about Lila correcting his post angle on the 2nd day. He thought about how he had driven those posts wrong for 4 days before she came. He thought about the fence that was standing correctly because he had given her the post driver. Thank you, he said. He went back inside. He sat at the kitchen table. He looked at his bandaged hands. Outside, he could hear Marcus Bennett's men cutting his oats. He had never had anyone cut his oats before. He sat with that for a long time. It was the hardest thing about the whole summer, and it was the thing that changed him. Marcus Bennett came to Caleb's property 10 days after the fire. Not announced. He appeared at the south fence line on horseback and dismounted and came through the gate and walked the property the way he had walked his own land for 40 years. Looking at everything, reading it, arriving at conclusions without asking for input. Caleb walked with him. They did not talk much. Marcus Bennett looked at the fence work. The Glidden wire tensioned correctly. The posts at the angle Lila had established on the second day. He looked at the oat field, now cut and stacked by his own men. He looked at the barn roof, the patch that wouldn't last the winter. He looked at the 4 cattle in the south pasture. At the south fence he stopped. He put his hand on a post and tested it. Solid. 2 degrees into the tension. Exactly right. "The big die up," Marcus Bennett said. "Harlan lost everything in February of 1887. I bought some of his cattle for 10 cents on the dollar when he walked off." He said it without pride, just as a fact. "I've been watching this land for 6 years. I know what it was and what it needs." "So do I," Caleb said. Marcus Bennett looked at him. "The north field, east third. You replanted with a shorter variety. Lila told me about the drainage," Caleb said. "She was right." Marcus Bennett said, "I taught her that." Something moved through his face, complicated. Something a man of 60 feels when he has been teaching his daughter things for 20 years and finds her teaching someone else. "I built this ranch in 10 years, Marcus Bennett said. "Started with a horse and a bedroll and $30 I'd saved working other men's cattle in Ohio." He looked at the south fence. "My daughter told me you knew that." "Martha, at the general store," Caleb said. Marcus Bennett almost smiled. "I told myself I didn't want Lila to go through what I went through," he said. "Starting from nothing, building year by year." He was quiet. "I think I've been confusing protecting her with deciding for her." Caleb said nothing. Marcus Bennett looked at him. "You went back into a burning barn 3 times after the roof beam cracked," he said, "for animals belonging to a man who told you to stay away from his daughter." He let that sit for a moment. "I can't argue with that," he said. "Not because you saved my horses. Because you went back when no one was watching, and nothing was owed, and the only reason was that 3 horses were still inside." He put his hat back on. "I'm not giving you my blessing today," he said. "I'm telling you I'm no longer your enemy. There's a difference." He mounted his horse. At the gate, he stopped. "The barn roof," he said before winter. "I'll send materials." Caleb looked at him. "I'll pay for the materials," Caleb said. Marcus Bennett looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "You will." He rode north. Caleb stood at the south fence and watched him go, and thought, "That is a man who just did the hardest thing he has done in years." He went back to work. They were married in September. The decision had been made in August on Caleb's porch in the Montana evening, simply and without ceremony, because neither of them needed ceremony. He had asked her plainly. She had said yes before he finished the sentence, which she told him afterwards she had been ready to do since approximately the Tuesday in April when he had said, "Land that nobody wants still needs someone to believe in it." The wedding was in the Cedar Creek Church. Lila dressed in the small room off the vestibule with Martha Greer attending the details, and 2 friends from Clearwater. She wore her mother's necklace, given to her at her mother's funeral, worn on every important occasion since. The church was filling. Her father was not there. She had known he might not come. Marcus Bennett had said, "I'm no longer your enemy." He had never said, "I give you my blessing." She had told herself she was prepared for the distinction. She had been telling herself this with decreasing conviction for 3 weeks. Martha fixed the last detail and stepped back. Lila picked up her flowers. She put her hand on the door to the church. "Lila?" Martha's voice soft and pointing. She turned. Martha was looking past her toward the back of the church. The back door was open. In the doorway, in his good coat hat in his hands, stood Marcus Bennett. He looked at his daughter the way a man looks at something he has been reconsidering for weeks, and has finally arrived at the right answer about. He walked up the aisle toward her, slowly, with the deliberate weight of a man who is doing something that is costing him something real. He stopped in front of her. He looked at her face for a long moment. "You look like your mother," he said. His voice was not entirely steady. She said nothing. She was not going to make this easy, because it should not be easy. But she was not going to make it hard either. "I've been watching that man build something," Marcus Bennett said. "Since March. The fence, the field. The way he went back into the barn when my own foreman wouldn't." He looked at her. A man who returns to a burning barn for animals belonging to his enemy does not do it for recognition. He does it because it's who he is. He offered her his arm. "My daughter," he said quietly, "is not going to walk to that altar alone." She looked at his arm. She looked at his face, at the 60 years of it, at the stubbornness and the pride and the love underneath both that had always been there. She took his arm, the same arm she had held at her mother's funeral. They walked down the aisle together. Caleb was at the altar. He watched them come, the woman he was going to marry, and the man who had told him to stay away from her, and had appeared at the back of the church on the September morning because 6 months of watching had led him to the only honest conclusion available. Caleb looked at Marcus Bennett. Marcus Bennett looked at Caleb. It was not warm. It was not a smile. It was the look of a man who has made a decision he intends to keep, which, from Marcus Bennett, was everything. They stayed on Caleb's 240 acres. This surprised Clearwater County, which had expected the marriage to mean Caleb moving to 5,000 acres and the Bennett name. It was the logical assumption. It was wrong. They stayed because it was Caleb's, and because Lila had spent enough afternoons on it to understand what it was becoming, and because both of them understood that the easy path was not the same as the right one. Marcus Bennett sent 20 Morgan cattle in October. Good stock. His best breeding cows delivered without ceremony, with a note that said, "For the South pasture. The grass is good there. The Morgan bloodline will suit the terrain. M.B." Caleb read it twice. He put it in the kitchen table drawer where he kept things that mattered. The herd grew carefully, not quickly. 20 became 32 by the second year. 32 became 48 by the third. The Morgan cattle breeding true in the South pasture. The bloodline Marcus Bennett had sent producing animals that were worth considerably more than the cattle Caleb had started with. The barn roof was replaced properly in October with materials Caleb paid for himself, and Marcus Bennett's men helped install, which was the arrangement Marcus Bennett had proposed, and Caleb had accepted without argument, which was itself a measure of how much had changed since March. Marcus Bennett came for Sunday supper starting in November of the first year. Not every Sunday, some Sundays, with the irregularity of a man who is moving towards something and cannot be hurried. He sat at Caleb's kitchen table and talked about cattle and weather and the price of feed and billings, with the focus of a man for whom these things were never merely conversation. On a Sunday evening in the second year walking to his horse after supper, he stopped at the south fence, the one Caleb had started on the day after Lila first rode through the gate. The fence that had been the beginning of everything. He put his hand on a post, 2 degrees into the tension. He tested it. Solid. He did not say anything. He nodded once the nod of a man delivering a verdict, and mounted his horse and rode north toward his own property. Caleb stood at the gate and watched him go. Lila stood beside him. "He'll never say it," she said. "I know," Caleb said. "He doesn't have to," she said. "No," Caleb said. He put his arm around her. The Montana evening held them at the south fence of a ranch that had been abandoned by the big die-up, and was now the most cared-for property in Clearwater County. The mountains were doing what they always did. The Morgan cattle were in the south pasture where they were supposed to be, and everything. The land and the herd and the fence standing correctly, and the woman beside him, and the old man riding north, who would be back next Sunday, was exactly right. Caleb Stone spent 11 years saving $420. He spent it on a property the big die-up had broken and nobody else wanted. The fence down the barn caved. The fields gone back to wildness after 6 years of nothing being asked of them. He got off his horse. He stood in the main field and felt certain about something nobody else could see. That certainty is the whole story. A man who saw what neglected land could become and had the patience to bring it out, post by post, section by section, in the correct order rather than the comfortable one. A woman who came to buy it and stayed to help fix the fence and found somewhere, between the post angle and the April afternoons, that what he was building was something she wanted to be part of, and a father who had built 5,000 acres from $30 and a bedroll, and had forgotten somewhere in the building that what he was actually making was a life, and that a life is built from character, not acreage. He remembered on a Wednesday night in July, when a man went back into a burning barn after the roof beam cracked for 11 horses that belonged to his enemy. No calculation, no performance, no audience. Just 3 more horses were still inside. I think about that. About what it reveals, not just about Caleb, but about all of us. What we do when nothing is owed and nobody is watching is the only honest measure of who we are. Marcus Bennett had built his life on that measure. He recognized it when he finally saw it. The real measure of a man was never the size of his ranch. It was what he went back for when the beam cracked. May God bless each and every one of you who listened today.